Here's Lily.
Thank you. Yay. Thank you so much for those of you who are returning, and thanks to you who are here for the first time. I know it's a very busy time of year, so that you're here and want to be part of this conversation is really meaningful, and it has a big impact. So I am Lily Pierpont. I am the executive director of ArtBridge, which is a nonprofit organization here in Santa Fe. We have 3 principal initiatives. One is Art Storming, which is a podcast that I have where we interview creatives. One is Santa Fe Arts Club, and many of you might be members of Santa Fe Arts Club and not know that it's even associated with ArtBridge, but we started during COVID and we have about 3,000 members now, and it's an online presence. And then the third initiative is Arts Core, which is what we consider basically everybody in this room as part of Arts Core. It's the community of people that are supporting the arts and doing whatever they're doing out there in the world. And whether you know it or not, you're an honorary member of Arts Core. And if you'd like to make that official, you can come to our website at artbridgenm.org and learn more about it there. So that's about me. Just to reiterate, ArtBridge is about cultivating creativity and connecting community through conversation. And so that's exactly what we're doing here. And one of the exciting things that happened last week is that all of the panelists were meeting for the first time, and the energy that created was really exciting. And I think we have a repeat of that. I think that a couple of you know each other already, but otherwise they were just getting acquainted as we were sitting down. And we're gonna spend some time doing 2 layers of introductions. And the introductions are important because it's helpful to see what these people are up to, the communities that they are serving, and the talent that we have to take us into this next era. So with that, we're going to go down the line, and everybody is going to talk about who they are and who the audience that they serve, you know, the organization. And we have a substitute, which is really our great opportunity, because Brianna was...
Just because I'm a substitute.
You're a substitute, but you happen to be a really important substitute because I think you are the founder, if I'm not of Creative Startups. So I'm going to let you do your own introduction so I don't bastardize it. Okay, off you go.
Okay, hi. I am Alice Loy, and I am a co-founder of Creative Startups. We're based here in Santa Fe. I have stepped back as the exec director, and Brianna Figueroa is our new exec director, and she is sick, so I'm here instead. Sorry. Creative Startups was founded in 2007, and a gentleman named Tom Augustin and I founded Creative Startups principally as a resource for creative and cultural entrepreneurs, because we saw that tech world gets all this love and affection around entrepreneurship. And we wondered where were all the great resources for cultural and artistic and creative entrepreneurs. And so we started the organization in 2007. And in 2014, we launched the world's first entrepreneurship accelerator for creative entrepreneurs. Meow Wolf came through that year. We wrote them their very first check. And we have gone on to work on 4 continents. We have about 750 alumni companies. I see one right here. And we've worked probably with about 65 Santa Fe companies. The other thing, so we still do entrepreneurship education. We also do strategic planning. So we worked on the state's Creative Industries Division strategic plan. We're currently advising the Treasurer of California on a creative economy finance network, and we host gatherings, usually at the edge of sort of creative tech and kind of cool things that Santa Fe could lead in, but maybe we're not yet. So that's me.
I have my mic. I'll use both. No. I don't enjoy speaking in front of groups of people, so you'll have to pardon me if I falter. My name is Matthew Chase Daniel. I've been in Santa Fe for 35, 40 years, something like that, and do different things, work as an artist since I got here. But about 15 years ago, a friend and I started Axle Contemporary, which is a mobile art gallery in an old bread truck, and started that as an LLC and then created a nonprofit to do that. So I'm appreciating what Alice is saying about entrepreneurship and strategic plans, and because we don't do any of that. And we started it sort of on a whim and as a silly, fun thing to do, and it was quickly well embraced by the community, so we kept doing it and learned a lot and grew. And so we show work by primarily New Mexico artists in New Mexico, mostly in Santa Fe, but all over the state. Do some of our own projects. I also do a radio show podcast called Coffee and Culture every other week. I also curate a exterior mural temporary wheat paste project on the corner of Lena Street and 2nd Street called the Lena Wall. So those change every 6 months to a year for the last few years. I'm on the Rail Yard Art Committee. I used to be on the City Art and Public Places Committee. So I wake up in the morning and have a lot to do, and I try to keep track of it. Earlier today, I was patching a roof, checking rat traps, cutting weeds, all stuff like that.
Can you hear me? Yeah, there we go. So my name is Laura Finley Smith, and I've lived in Santa Fe since 1988. I have not worked for every gallery in Santa Fe, but certainly a highlight of some of the larger galleries. Gerald Peters Gallery, and then Nidra Matucci Galleries, Peyton Wright, Morningstar. I could kind of go on and on. But so I worked for Nidra. I was the director of that gallery for 20 years. And through that, I met a collector and left the gallery in 2012 to then work for this collection, large private collection. And I just left a couple of months ago. So I'm now working on a number of projects, a big book project, and then a project in Albuquerque. But one thing that you all may know about, next door at Chatter, in the extension of CCA, so where Tia Collection has a rotating exhibition and then also a mural project. So that's one of the many initiatives that I've been part of. So.
Hello, I am Drew Trujillo, and my family goes back at least 15 generations here. I grew up here, moved all over the world, came back. Usually in my practice, art, creative always informs, and what I found over and over again is there is this image in my head or this animation or these sounds, and there's not a tool in order to be able to make that a reality. And so that really inspired me to be able to learn how to program and create my own tools. And so I've worked for video game companies, post-production, worked for Adobe, Autodesk, and I was at Meow Wolf, and I oversaw the sound, lighting, engineering, computer technologists, and 50 people basically for the Denver and the Vegas builds. And then COVID happened, and that was an excellent opportunity in my mind to circle back on this idea of, what things had I put on hold. I have a 28-year-old daughter when she was growing up, and big part of that was going back to film school, or going back to school, graduate school. And so I went back to UNM, and the reason why I chose UNM was because there were so many peculiar questions about growing up in New Mexico historically. like the 𝘾𝙗𝙖𝙨𝙚, the 𝘎𝙖𝙑𝙖𝙀, et cetera, that I really wanted to deconstruct. I wanted to understand culture and identity in an MFA practice. And so graduated there, and now I'm starting a new computer science for the arts department and undergrad program at IAI, so the Institute of American Indian Arts, if you're not familiar with that. In addition to that, my practice, you'll see some of that tonight, I sonify the movement of dancers, and that's what I've been focused on for the last 3 years or so.
So thank you all. And what I really want to highlight here is the range of things that Santa Fe has to offer. Last week, we heard from people from all different sectors of the community too, and it just keeps on, the kaleidoscope just keeps on growing. So what, Alice, brought you into your interest for doing funding for the arts or supporting artists to be entrepreneurial?
I was teaching a class at UNM's business school, and all the MBA students, it was a social entrepreneurship class. And this was 2006. And all of the case studies and all of the speakers I had lined up were environmentalists or women's rights and advocates or things that were spot on for social issues. But at least half of the business school students stood up, and I had them on the first day say, what's your project? What's your hope in terms of starting a business? And they almost universally had a cultural business. And so I'm sitting there going, well, okay, I don't have anything about, okay, well, I'm gonna have to redesign this whole course. Because I have a degree in anthropology, and I was like, what I was gonna talk about and teach for the next 3 or 4 months was not relevant. And so I met with Tom Augustin, and Tom is, I don't know how many people here know Tom, but he was one of the founders of the Folk Art Market. He ran the Museum of New Mexico Foundation. I'm sure you know Tom well. And I called Tom and I said, help. And he said, well, cultural entrepreneurs is an important part. And he kind of sucked me in to working on this. And it was like we tripped over this enormous thing that we didn't realize was happening until we started to respond to it. And there was just such great need and opportunity that we kind of just kept going, so.
Well, that's a perfect illustration of why we're all convened here, because, you have these opportunities are sort of disasters that turn into portals for opportunity. Yeah. And I think one of the things that came out of the last discussion was that oftentimes it's out of ignorance or audacity that these things start to get rolling. And so thank goodness that happened. And you had come from an anthropology degree, so how did that resonate with you, the cultural thing? How did it go from anthropologist to cultural opportunity to what it is now?
So I have a degree in cultural ecology, I have a master's in business and a PhD in entrepreneurship. And so it kind of all made sense from a distance. But best of all, it made sense for New Mexico because we hadn't yet figured out, we're getting there, and other states are honestly a little bit behind us, which is cool. But we're finally now understanding that investing in culture and who we are as a people in a place, and going deeper on that instead of trying to pretend that maybe we want to be Silicon Valley or something, which was the question that was being asked. How could we become like Silicon Valley? When we moved here 25 years ago, and it was like, why would we want to do that? But there weren't alternative theories to how you create meaningful work and well-paid jobs. And now there are, and the creative economy is more and more sort of one of the things on the list that policymakers and increasingly finance people are talking about. So that's pretty exciting. I mean, it's kind of overwhelming because it's at this intersection of really different values, right? Where we're not really sure that the capitalist system is working out great. And yet if we don't engage in the conversation, we can't change it. And so it's sort of, it's this 20-year trajectory of, and people locally building. I mean, I remember when Axel was started and I was like, that's cool, that's cool. And then coming in
We're just in it for the But
Yeah, no, yeah, I know. You're a capitalist pig. I get it. But, you know, we're okay with that. But I mean, I think increasingly cities are aware of how important it is to invest in who we are instead of fantasizing about who we think we might want to be, which is a really different conversation.
And one that's probably continues to evolve. Who do you want to be? And who are you serving?
Yeah, I mean, I was just on a call earlier today with a research group that's looking at capabilities approaches to measuring economic output. Because if we live in an economy that's post-productivity, because the machines are doing it, how are we measuring economic output? That's a really big question. And if we're talking about measuring the value of creative processes, humans have not yet figured out, how do we really value that? And so fundamental shifts in systems have to take place. And some cities and leaders are starting to ask these questions.
So I'm just curious on the panel, how many people were familiar with creative startups before you walked in the room besides, well, Drew? And how did you know about it?
Through Meow Wolf originally, but our paths crossed multiple times, including you put on this incredible conference, the Creative Experience Conference. And it was just a collection of people who were working, obviously in the creative, a lot of immersive people in Santa Fe. And yeah, it was a very inspiring group. And actually, one of the performer tonight, Ray, I met through there. And so, yeah, a lot of amazing people that you brought together there.
And just out of curiosity, in the audience, who before tonight knew about creative startups or has accessed it? Oh, that's great, really great. And so Matt, you knew about Matthew's project with Axel, but Axel, did Axel know about
I've
creative startups?
I've heard of creative startups, but I've never gotten to know them or engaged with what they do.
So you got started completely on your own, and I know that you and Axel you do a lot of grant writing, and you get supported by, so I'll be very curious to hear where your pain points are in terms of this new situation that we're facing.
Oh, in terms of the federal government and funding?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great, exciting, wonderful topic. So Axel was part of a grant through UNM Maxwell Museum for a project that we had finished that was funded in part by an NEA grant. And in April, so the money had all been spent out. The end date was May 30th. And we got a letter in April saying, we're changing your end date because we're shutting everything down. We're changing your end date to May 30th. And so we filed an appeal saying we fit in all the things you want, and we'd like you to change our date back to May 30th. And we didn't hear back. So we weren't affected in that grant, except for being slightly amused and slightly dismayed, largely dismayed. We do get funding through New Mexico Arts, which is funded, half or more comes through the NEA. And so that funding has been delayed for this fiscal year, which started July 1st. So in August 15th, we'll know more. And I believe their New Mexico Arts agreement with the NEA is that they have to follow the presidential directives, which are anti-DEI, anti-gender ideology, and any future presidential directives that might apply. And so they're running it by their lawyers and deciding how to accept or not accept that or what to do about that, because a lot of the projects that they fund are specifically around those issues, not all of them. So not sure how that's going to work. Our funding, so Axel, I mean, different things. Axel is run by Jerry Wellman and myself. The two of us do everything from the grant writing to the changing the alternator, to painting, to installation, to curation, to writing press releases, and all of the things, social media, all of it. And so our financial model is we pay all of our hard costs first, and then if we have money left over, we pay ourselves, and we split that money. Our hard costs are low. We pay artists. When we sell work, we split the sale of the work with the artist, so we make some money that way. But it's largely grants, donations, and doing it on the cheap. So in a way, we're very well designed for a reduced funding landscape because we don't have big rent, big insurance, electricity, heat, cooling, any of that.
Yeah. And so by contrast, Laura, I'm wondering, since you come from more private funding sector, say a little bit more how the current situation might or might not be affecting you, and how have you gotten yourself organized to navigate this next phase of things?
Well, I mean, galleries kind of contract with, shows that aren't as extravagant, and perhaps supporting artists that you kind of pepper it through, knowing that you're going to support one artist and you can sell the entire show, and you really like that person, but maybe you don't love the art as much. And then the next is, a passion project, and you may or may not sell anything. And so, there's that balance. And I mean, I have always been a total capitalist pig, and very, on the very positive side of that. And then also, with a larger gallery, there is a level of artists that are very well known, sometimes secondary market material where it's much higher value. And then you've got kind of mid-career artists. And so you're really working to, establish them, get their careers going. And then you have really young artists who are just starting out. And, so it's a lot of work.
Gets distributed across a lot of different things.
Very much
so.
so.
In terms of your particular situation right now, are you in a position that you're going to feel the pinch of the current situation, or are you in a more unique situation where you'll be able to ride through this? You and your clients, I should say, not just you personally.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll see. We're kind of just a few steps into this, unfortunately. But I've got several projects right now that will take me through the next couple of years, and one of them that will be a much longer term, ongoing project, a little bit here and there. So I don't exactly know. I mean, I am in an enviable position. There's no question about that. But at the same time, it takes me back. So when I was working at Jerry, I was on the board of the Gallery Association, the very beginning board, and I didn't have, my daughter's 27, so my daughter was not born yet, and but I had a number of friends who were teachers, and they were talking about like their creativity in the classroom and the things that that they were asking all their friends to save, so that those things could be turned into a form of recycled art. And in one of those conversations, I said, well, what about crayons and pastels and pencils? And they were like, oh, well, we're just, if we have those. And it broke my heart thinking that teachers, as hard as they work, that they didn't have the materials that they needed to spark a child's imagination. And so that was a very early on initiative with the Gallery Association. It was the beginning of ArtSmart. And we thought that we were doing such a huge thing and giving the art teachers, and some of the schools have multiple art teachers, $150. So this would be in 93. So $150 for each semester. and all of the schools. And so like that was such a huge thing. And then, you know, you watch, it's that idea of collaboration and how a kernel of an idea can turn into something really big, and where ArtSmart then went, you know, in a very big way. So
I want to come back to ArtSmart because they're still in existence, I hope.
I don't think so.
They're gone. Okay. Well, segue to education, higher education.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way, for asking this question. I was at a conference, a convening not long ago, and felt like it was the white elephant in the room, and nobody brought it up. And so I think it's, in terms of IAIA, where we stand, in case you're unaware, the proposed appropriations bill, which should be taken up here shortly, IAI's budget has been zeroed out. And as far as I understand, if not all, most tribal colleges, 90% of their budget has been pulled from there. That's the proposal. We'll find out soon how that plays out. In terms of where we stand from the President Martin, his perspective, we have roughly a year that we can withstand that, and then from there it's a question of TBD. And so I think the most important point of that, and the timing is really critical right now, is to reach out to the Congress, our Congress representatives, and just let them know if you value the Institute of American and Arts, definitely reach out and let them know your perspective on that.
Well, and so specifically, didn't you just create a whole curriculum for them, and how will that affect, or do you have separate funding for that, or how does that work?
Yeah, my department, I have a grant, and there's X number of years on it. However, with that said, even if it goes 4 years forward, it doesn't make a difference if there's no students there, right? And so it'll be interesting. And I did just meet with the grantor behind that, and they're super supportive of us, but that doesn't mean that
You still need a campus.
it's $18.3 million per school year that the federal government puts into IAIA.
And Alice, where does the funding come from for your organization?
Well, we had received a $3 million EPA grant to work with Native communities across northern New Mexico, and that vanished. So we've definitely been affected. The majority of our funding comes from, we're a nonprofit, we're a 501c3, but the majority of our funding comes through contracts with cities or states or universities. We get some foundation grants, and we've done pretty well with federal grants over the years. I will say, though, that I'm going to take a contrarian view and say that I don't really think it's a big deal if the NEA goes away, because I don't think the NEA has done a great job funding radical art, and I don't think the NEA has been the major funder of really fantastic art in this country. Kickstarter, in 1 year, funded more art projects than the NEA had funded over the last decade. Yeah, I mean, that's a reality. I think this issue of underfunding communities that are trying to hold on to their culture so that we have a diversity of thought in this country is a really huge effing problem. But I personally would be terrified if we lost our tribal colleges, because we start to lose the soul of who we are. But I don't feel like the NEA really represents and funds a lot of the soul of who we are as a nation, just to be honest with you. And I've gotten NEA grants, and I'm sure somebody's going to hear this and think, well, she'll never get one again. But I just, until recently, really, I didn't know a lot of artists of color who got NEA grants, to be really honest with you. And so I'm not sure it's such a bad thing. And the other thing is, I would say the NEA's budget was like $100 million. How many of you know in here that we have, in the state of New Mexico, one of the largest sovereign wealth funds in the world? How many people know that? $63 billion. $63 billion. What are we doing with the interest that generates? Why are we not funding tribal colleges? We have the premier arts tribal college in the world in New Mexico. Clearly, that's essential, right? And so to some extent, I say we can rail on and on about the NEA, but we have much bigger problems closer to home that go at the heart of the bedrock of our culture, and that's what we need to start thinking about. How do we protect that?
Well, and I imagine that you have already started to think about where new sources of funding are going to come from, and are you going to the business community?
Yeah, absolutely. So the project we're working with right now in California, the Treasurer of California reached out to us and asked us to help figure out a statewide network of finance people and tools to rethink how the creative economy is funded. Because begging for pennies from the NEA isn't going to work. And when you look at other industries, you see that they get enormous subsidies and relatively little return, frankly, on the. I mean, we're all aware of like when Amazon did its thing about where should we bring our magic to, and everybody was like, not here, right? I think most of us watched that. People are starting to be aware. We don't know that we really want this huge corporation here. But if they're not giving tax subsidies or other incentives to those kinds of companies, who are they giving them to? Why aren't they giving them to your local brewery and art gallery and charter school? Why aren't we thinking about that? And part of it is that we have very old systems for measuring the output of the creative economy. And so it's hard for creatives to make that argument. You can't divorce this question of how do we measure value and invest in new systems where new kinds of value are generated. Those have to go hand in hand. But yeah, and there are people on Wall Street interested in working on this. There are people, obviously, in Main Street, in foundations. There are a lot of people really concerned and excited to work on these questions. So it's a pretty awesome time, actually, in the creative economy.
Right, I was going to say, it sounds like a great opportunity. And Matthew, I'm curious because you've insulated yourself from, you know, the losses, the possible losses. How have you done that? Is that, I mean, I know one of the things that you do is you go to communities all over New Mexico and you've animated interest in art, high art, low art, community art. Speak to that a little bit.
Well, I don't know, what do you mean?
Well, I mean, like how-
insulated from the losses?
Insulated from you know, any potential cutbacks from the grants,
Oh,
that
financially,
you will still
right.
have an audience. You will still be able to get your program to the people.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I'm in a privileged position, which is I don't have to draw a huge salary, and I can spend a lot of time doing the work. And so that's part of what makes it work, and part of what makes it work is, I mean, there was a change, you know, so we started that project 15 years ago, so all of a sudden you could, around then you could build a website and host it for cheap, and you could do social media yourself, and you could do email blasts, you know, whereas before that, mailing out postcards is really expensive to 2,000 or 3,000 people. And so we've never done any of that. So it's a physical space, but tiny, and then it's a virtual presence, which is large. And so the two hand in hand. And I think the physical experience is very important because we park in front of a grocery store and people see compelling contemporary art, and maybe they look at it for 5 seconds, or maybe they're there for an hour, but either one is okay. And so it creates a broader audience. And so I think a lot of people are reluctant to go into a museum or an art gallery that feels all formal, and there's someone sitting at the desk who may not look up when you walk in, and you know, it's intimidating. I feel that way too. And so we've worked both to do compelling stuff and high quality stuff, and sometimes very well-known artists, sometimes emerging artists, all different things. But to break down that issue by just sticking it in people's faces, and in a cool vehicle, so some people just come in and aren't interested in the truck, and they don't give a shit about the art. But that's okay too.
Yeah.
And then things like the Lean Wall, that I started a Kickstarter yesterday and raised $1,000. So that'll buy paint and brushes and give the artists a little bit of money for using his work and printing, you know. So, and I've applied for grants too, which I may or may not get. So I guess it's projects that I don't need to raise $100,000 to do on day one to start it. And that's just my interest. I don't think it's better or worse. I think it's just what interests me somehow.
And one way to go. And one of the things that came out of our last discussion were the different avenues to pursue in terms of where does the funding come from, but also how do we cultivate new audiences so that there's a demand for it. So it's not just putting up art in a gallery or in a museum and waiting for people to come to you. It's taking it
Yeah.
to the people and engaging them and making it feel like it's part of their community and part of their culture.
Yeah, and when, like in Axel, we do a traveling show and we take it, our photo portrait thing, which we take all over the state of New Mexico, or the all-res project we did with Raphael Biguet all over the Navajo Nation. People are excited to see art being brought to their community and not asking, everything's free. Like, we do the portrait, you get a portrait, you don't pay, we don't pay you, you don't pay us. It's an exchange. Like, we get to take your picture, and that's part of our thing, but you get a copy of it. And people appreciate that, and people appreciate the fact that we drive all the way to Chinle or something where there's not a lot of contemporary art galleries or any, and that we bother. So just bothering and showing up in communities that that aren't big cities with galleries and museums makes it easy. Because now we do it in Santa Fe and everyone has seen what we do and people still love it. But it's much different when we go to Silver City or somewhere, or Pie Town. You know.
I mean, don't you think part of that is accessibility? You've broken down the very barrier that, I mean, having been in galleries for so many years, and, you know, I mean, at Peters, but definitely at Matteucci, Nidra's whole theory was you put the price on the wall so that the person who's looking at the painting is curious about it. They may not be able to afford that, but it's really almost humiliating to somebody if they're forced to come to you and say, excuse me, what's that? What does that cost? And then
Right.
your answer is $100,000, right? But so when you bring the truck,
Yeah.
and you've already broken down that barrier so that they have that connection. I think that's such a beautiful thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, sometimes we get drunk people looking for burritos.
But wait, Laura, I want to go back to you for just a second because, you know, what you bring to this conversation that's so interesting is that Santa Fe is an art destination. So people are coming from all over the world to see the art that is in those galleries. They are buying tickets to cross thresholds into those galleries. And so that's a very important part of our art economy here. And I'm just curious if you could speak to a little bit more of your experience of, have you seen that audience change? Have you seen the gallery scene becoming more accessible to people? Is that gap widening? What's your experience of that? And then the other thing, I know we're not going to speak to it very much, but the Tia collection, for example, which now is on display downstairs and in a rotating way, but you know, their whole emphasis is lending art to other museums. And so what we don't realize here in Santa Fe is what an incredible treasure trove of arts we have, from the highest of high to the more community-based. So speak to that a little bit more, that community.
Yeah, I mean, I think that certainly the audiences have changed over the years. I mean, you know, I came here in 1988, and, you know, I mean, that first until probably 98, there were exhibitions that we had at Peters, at Matteucci, et cetera, and I mean, the entire shows would sell out. And so, and I mean, I was 20 when I came here, so I kind of figured that that's the way galleries worked. I was like, wow, this is so cool. It's like minting money. And, you know, when in fact it's not. I mean, it is a lot of, you know, as the gallery director, you're wearing so many hats. And you have to be ready to to be positive and to work hard and, and just, it's the accessibility though. And so, unlike, let's say, New York galleries, I'm sure it happens all over, but I'll use New York in particular. You can walk into a majority of those galleries, whether they're the big Zwirner, Hauser and Wirth, et cetera, or a smaller gallery, and they don't look up and even say hello. Then that's where that accessibility comes in. And so the galleries, the places where I've worked, that was the most important thing. Not being on a computer. I mean, at Matucci, there were no computers in the front room. Letters, this is still scary, but it still happens. They are handwriting letters because that goes back into the office and somebody else types it up because their primary focus is to stand up and to say hello, to make sure that person feels welcome, and not to pester them or anything like that, but to be there to answer questions, or you're visiting from Austin. Oh, hey, I'm from Texas too. I mean, they're natural, real ways to start a conversation and to let somebody know that you're interested in them. You're happy that they've come, and I think it's the interaction where, I think social media is great for so many things, but human interaction is not part of it. And so being in galleries and, attending openings and being able to participate in something like tonight and hear what others are thinking and saying. I mean, I'm so curious about the creative, what are you saying? The qualitative measurement of the creative space. I mean, it makes me think back to eons ago. It was in the early 2000s when the McCune Foundation it was a very huge analysis that they did, and state government had basically ignored the fact that the arts were the largest industry in New Mexico. And then this big report came out, and then all the legislators were like, oh, okay. They couldn't ignore it anymore. It was something very real. So, I think our sense of place, I mean, you think about the show that Cecilia Alamani has curated for the site the 12th Invitational and International. And it's about our sense of place, right? It's about bringing all of these really special creatives who either have been here for a long time, who came and stayed, maybe they came and passed through, but New Mexico makes an impact, and in the arts in particular, in such a palpable way.
Well, that's a perfect segue for Drew, because I want to hear how IAIA is handling, keeping people engaged, keeping people who graduate from IAIA here in the arts community here. What does that look like over at the campus?
That's really interesting. Like, to me, when I was interviewing for the position, one of the questions that I asked was, how do you measure success for the students, like when they leave IAIA? And the answer was what I was hoping for, but I wasn't anticipating it. And it was, we hope that the students go back to their communities if they want to, and to be able to help there, regardless of where that is, because community, family, roots are such an important piece of that, rather than being shipped away, uprooted essentially, and going to somewhere else in California, Silicon Valley, or whatever, right? That's an option. There's definitely a lane for that, but I love the fact that that was the first response in relation to that question. So, yeah.
Okay, so I get that, but say a little bit more too, just about how, maybe more about just the program of IAIA, because I think it's very unique in that students who come there get a chance to try a lot of different things, and so they're encouraged to explore a lot before they leave, so that they have more to, and one of those things is now high tech. So you're talking about traditional arts all the way to the kind of stuff that you're up to.
Yeah, that was the other thing that came up during the interview process, and that was it was stated that they view themselves as a contemporary arts school. And I really love that, because I think back in the 80s here, growing up here, Santa Fe, and in my mind, I remember the 80s as turquoise coyotes, right? And that was all the museums, and that was all the, it's not true, but that's how I remember it, right? And then Santa Fe comes into play, and there's this diversification and like this embracing of contemporary. And when I was thinking about accepting that position, one of the things that I did was I Googled Native American artist, and then I did ChatGPT for that as well. And of course, what I got was a man with traditional headdress on. And I thought that was an incredible opportunity to really think about the image that's being created there. And so if we combine these words, indigenous with innovation, right, which for whatever reason it's not in the normal lexicon yet, I think there's a great opportunity to destroy that stereotype. And so the pathway for the students is, first of all, in my mind, we're obviously a creative arts school, right? So creative goes first. That's overlapped with computer science. Secondly, or not secondly, but after culture. So art, culture, and also computer science. And the computer science, in my mind, is all about empowering those students in terms of being able to create tools that complement their worldview, but also are designed in a way that complement that worldview. They don't have to follow in line to a structure that is set up by a Western approach to that. I think that's really important. And I think there's a couple other things that are really important in terms of this process of a student going through this. One is critical thinking, especially today, right? Being able to teach the students to be able to critically think and deconstruct systems that we live in, whether it's art-related or not, in order for them to really be able to take a step back and then reconstruct that in a way that is complementary to their life, right? And then I think the other part that's really important in terms of this journey for them is overcoming fear. Fear of programming, fear of math, any fear of the computer. I remember the first time I stepped in front of a computer and a friend of mine said, here's a mouse, touch it. And I was like, I'll do it later. And this programming theme, I programmed on punch cards, 2 + 2, you wait 2 weeks and comes back, and you find out that it's 4. And I'm like, oh, that programming theme, so it's going to pass. It's just a fad. But in terms of that program and overcoming fear, it's going to be the creative in my mind. It's going to be that curiosity in the student that really helps them move beyond that fear and becomes comfortable in these spaces of the unknown. And I think even if they don't become programmers or whatever in the end, if they are able to be comfortable in these unfamiliar spaces and be able to critically think and come up with solutions that really help them, I think that would be a success.
I think that's probably, you've just hit on something that obviously is very near and dear to my heart, which is just reinforcing that that ability, because one of the skills that every single person on this panel, probably every single person in this room has, is the ability to adapt to new circumstances. Part of that is technology. Part of that is just being able to adapt and pivot. And creatives do that really well because we wake up every morning and we do it in some form or another. And it's what the world is really needing right now is a large group of people who can pivot and do other things. The other thing I want to talk about when we get back from the break, and we're going to take a break now in just a minute, is this idea of data and how we measure, how we measure qualified quality stuff, qualified versus quantify. And one of the reasons that you have those handouts, if you got them on the way in, is because one of the things we're doing with Collaboration Lab is to collect data from all of you that we will use in session 5. And again, I will point to that question 4, which is a metric, which is how is your experience of pessimism or optimism on the scale of 1 to 5 as you're sitting here, well, maybe when you first came in, and as you start to move through this experience, whether that changes. So these are data points that we're trying to, they're actually qualifiable data points that we're trying to measure and put into some kind of format. And I've got a new friend in the audience who's going to be helping ArtBridge do that. So that's Hodge in the front row there. And so he's helped us put together this questionnaire, and we're going to be collecting those data points. So also, I would like to invite you all to, if there are questions or things that you've been points of interest that you'd like to address in part 2 of this discussion, if you'll fill out an index card and get it to me, then I will, rather than pass a mic through the audience, I'll just read the questions up front for the panelists. So let's reconvene here at 7:15, try to be back so that we can see Drew's performance, and then we'll continue with the conversation. Thank you.
What if a dancer's movement didn't accompany sound, but became sound? The first epiphany comes from Louis Fuller's silent film from 1896. It's called Serpentine Dance. There was something about that video where I could hear music being generated based upon her movement. I could see the math, I could see the programming. And so then the question was, does the system exist, both the hardware and the software, in order for me to explore this rabbit hole and to make this sonification of movement a reality? From that epiphany, I discovered tools like that did not exist, and so I decided to create my own sonification system that transforms movements into sound in real time. Even the smallest shift of my wrist becomes a very expressive way to sonify that movement. The objective of this piece is, in the simplest way, to show the cause and effect between movement and the sonification of that movement. So each wrist and ankle is tracked independently using motion sensors. I don't respond to the sound, I compose it through my movement. Inspired by how two dancers move, in this piece, I imagine elastic cords stretching between my wrists. And so as I twist and I rotate them and I pull them apart, sound changes. Tension becomes a tone. The name of this sonification system is called otro. Otro means the other. And for centuries, the other has meant exclusion. It justified slavery, erased indigenous identities, interned families, banned queer lives, and silenced women. But now we reclaim it. For me, otro is no longer a label of shame. It's a banner of pride. Our otherness is not a weakness. It's our power. It's also the name of the system I've built, a platform for other voices. And then came the second epiphany. It was an Wim Wenders documentary on Pina. The question I asked myself was, what if space itself could be played like an instrument? In Pina Bausch's work, it's not always the movement that matters, but the space between the bodies. It's the pause before the contact. It's the falling and catching and the tension that exists between one dancer and another. It's that invisible thread stretched taut between two dancers and their proximity to each other. It's the moment just before the rope reaches its limit. Inspired not only by Pina, but also the phase-shifting structures of Stephen Reich's piano phase. This piece maps those temporal principles onto space using location-based sensors. As performers move from a central column, their positions are continuously tracked in real time. Their physical distance from the center column determines a temporal offset, creating an evolving composition shaped by proximity, motion, and this invisible data flowing between bodies and code. In Three Sisters, each dancer, wearing location and motion-based sensors, navigates to hidden zones. These zones trigger shifts in instrumentation that are played through their movement. As they get closer to each other in terms of proximity, the crescendo increases dramatically. This is what otro means now. It's another way to compose through spatial composition. It's another way to move. It's another way to be heard. It's another way to create music, to take these performances on tour, to teach, to collaborate across cultures and borders, to collaborate with cinematographers, sound designers, choreographers, dancers, any type of movers.
5, 4, 3.
The hand is so good. See, like those moments, it's just like a little bubble wrap and then a little.
That's all good. That was awesome.
Okay. So just a little context. This performance, we've never rehearsed. It's totally experimental. We have no idea what's really going to happen. So you're going to be as surprised as we are.
So I'm an energy worker, and so I invite you to take a big breath. And as you perceive, just be curious with us in this experiment and just notice anything that you feel in your body as you receive the sound and the movement, just noticing what's moving in you. Okay, let's play.
So these sensors, they are picking up the technical details are, it's picking up acceleration, our relationship to the Earth's magnetic force, and then a gyroscope as well on X, Y, and Z. So it's almost like a compass sitting on your hands in 3 dimensions. They're very small, they're very lightweight, and that information goes via Bluetooth to my phone, which goes into a custom application on the phone. And then it goes into the otro software that I made for the live performances. And so it's generating the sounds in real time. So this little bit of movement is basically modulating a synthetic instrument, essentially. It doesn't have to be a synthetic instrument, like a synthesizer could be pre-recorded audio. There's tons of flexibility there. The location-based sensors, which we didn't experience tonight, they are, what's amazing about those, and it's the same technology that's used on your Find My phone, Find My headphones, whatever that Apple has. It can, the accuracy, it could be in a performance area that's 500 meters with a 10 centimeter amount of accuracy in terms of locating the performer within that space. And the combination of those two is pretty incredible. So for example, like if I'm wearing that location-based sensor in here, in one of those performances with the 2 women, the 3 sisters, we had these invisible zones, and so I know the distance between where they're standing and where that zone is, and so I can do things like fade out one set of instrumentation and then fade in a new set, or when they step in zone number 3, it could completely change the behavior of that experience, and that's really fascinating, I think, in my mind. And then, as I also mentioned in the video, the crescendo, so I'm measuring distance between 2 dancers, and I'm using that basically as a way to control volume and the intensity and the bass in that performance piece. There's a lot more to it, but yeah.
Wow. That was really trippy. So is that what you're creating? Is that what you're part of the curriculum that you're creating at IAIA?
That's an excellent question. It is part of it. Everything builds up to the foundation. The first 2 years is computer science related, but computer science in relation to the arts. And so just the basics in terms of how to learn how to program. And when I was analyzing the potential of the program and the design constraints that existed, like in terms of budget and time and number of professors that I would need to design the course, the program I really wanted, I knew I couldn't branch out into every different medium, but I knew I could get the basics and build it in a way where in 3rd and 4th year, as long as the students had the basic foundation there and the instructors were there to support them, they could branch out in whatever way they want. And so to specifically answer your question, performance is part of that trajectory. And so getting to that, before you get to that point, learning how to program, of course, learning real time, working with video, working with audio. We have this incredible dome space that's there that we have the ability to be able to do what's called kiva mode, which means we rotate the dome so that it's basically like a kiva, and we could raise that up. And within that circle, within the round, we can do performances within there. And so this summer, we're focused on updating all the computers, all the projectors, getting all the sound system to work properly, and with the intention of, in the end, they'll be able to create their own custom instruments that they could use to perform with and control live visuals, live audio as well during a performance that is, getting back to your earlier question, traditional but also contemporary at the same time.
Right, and so I have a question for Alice. Seeing this kind of thing, what does your entrepreneurial brain say about how would you pitch this kind of contemporary art to, how would you how would you know how to support it? How would you pitch this to a business sponsor, for example? How do you see the relevance of something like this for our community? I mean, it's kind of putting you on the spot, but it's what we're doing.
I don't.
You don't?
Totally kidding. I'm totally kidding. I mean, actually, what I was thinking about was the importance of investing in individual artists creating really edgy work in the same way that we invest in scientists who create work that doesn't necessarily have to turn into something that solves a problem tomorrow. And we value science in that way, and we invest billions and billions, but we don't do that. And so here you've sort of translated the wind. Like, I was thinking about how I'm sure you can hear when, like a dog maybe could hear the sound of me doing that. But for you to bring that to life, like, that's fascinating. And I would guess if you put this technology and an artist like Ray in a room with scientists, they would be able to say, oh, that makes me think maybe we could do this, right? And so that's where you start to maybe have a business case, but I don't know that there always should be a business case.
Well, I guess I'm just trying to get to some sort of the collaboration that starts to happen between, and how do we bring science and the arts together, not to necessarily create anything concrete, but to get that conversation going.
Yeah, I mean, and fortunately people are doing that work, putting scientists in the room with artists, but it's not yet that prevalent. Like, we need to do more of that, and we need to shift how people understand the importance of art and how we think about art as a solution to a lot of things that you maybe can't measure. But like, I'm sure all of us can remember seeing a painting that just blew our minds, and we just had to keep looking at it. Okay, well, we don't need to measure that necessarily, but we need to value that. And so I think moving away from everything has to have this very concrete, measurable business case where it's solving something so somebody else can make money, I think that problematizes art in a way that it shouldn't be.
That's excellent. It reminds me of my experience at Autodesk when I was in the Applied Innovation Lab. Basically, it was a glorified artist in residence program. And the goal there basically was, here's a robotic arm. They liked what I was doing in terms of programming and simulating painting. And they said, my boss was like, I'll be back in 6 months to see what you come up with, right? And so during that process, coming from a professional background, if it was an engineering project, I would be very explicit in terms of how I'm defining what the objective is, what the milestones are, and I have X amount of time to go from here to here, and here's what will come up with the end. But instead, for that process, I took it from a very organic approach, and I said, okay, here's this thing, and I'm not quite sure where it's going to go, but I'm going to open up and I'm going to listen to it, and I'm going to explore, and I'm going to iterate, and I'm going to iterate, and I'm going to iterate, where failure is not a bad thing. Failure is just going to happen all the time. It's just part of this cyclical process. And in the end, what happened was very pragmatic, practical things popped up out of that. They just naturally come to the surface. And so within that 6 months, not only was I teaching it the robotic arm to paint, but also chisel wood blocks so that we could do 3D printing. But a lot of that software, as prototype, ended up in software that they rolled out in various ways. And so there's at least two different paths to that same goal. One is more organic than the other, and I think that there's not a trust necessarily within our society to really embrace that and embrace the incredibly valuable failure that happens along that way.
Yeah, and speaking of trust, I think there's a gap between people understanding, making it accessible. So, I mean, when you were working in the galleries, Laura, what methods did you use to make art that people didn't understand accessible? And I'll ask you the same question, Matthew, because you said some people come in for a second and look at the art and they turn around. So part of what we have to do in terms of making the communication full circle is making it feel like it's a part of everybody's life. So how do we make art not other?
I mean, I think a lot of it is about, my approach was always to the person who was asking me questions, what was the artist's intention? I mean, I think that so many artists don't want necessarily, I mean, it's for them, it's very personal. And so I always pivoted that question to be more about what did they see? What did they feel? Did they like it? Did they not? You know, and then of course a lot of times the question was, well, you know, is this a good investment? And I was like, well, if you've got all the money in the world and you buy this and you hate it, I think it's a really bad investment. I mean, pure and simple. What do you think?
I think a lot of art I don't like. So I think sometimes I show work in the Axel or wherever, and people understand it and like it, and other people dislike it or don't understand it. And I don't think it should be art that everyone can understand or like. I think we have different natural interests and different intelligences. And so, like, I go to a museum or a place like Sight, you know, I go to Sight Santa Fe, which has I love the people there and they do great work, you know, and half the shows I don't like, and half the shows I really like. Or I go to a museum and I see one piece I think is fantastic and 100 pieces that I walk by and don't care. And I think it's important to leave space for that, because I think art triggers our mind and our imagination and our thought process. And so, you know, like Drew's work that we just saw, everyone in this room had a different reaction to it and different ideas inspired by it. And there's you know, like I see it and I'm like, oh, I want to get more rhythm. I want the people, because, you know, playing a guitar or playing drums or tap dancing is making sound through movement as well. And so my thought on that is like, oh, I want to see this become like a bass guitar, you know, but it's not. It's a different thing. And so the way he's done it is there's a openness for different people to interpret it in different ways and adore it or dislike it or whatever. And I think that's important, to allow that space.
You just made me think of another thing, which is that it becomes a pathway when we grant that space and that grace for something to just be what it is without having to put a like or a dislike label on it. I think that having more of that, as well as learning how to think out of the box and bend and blend and break conventions, is a way that we're going to be able to come together in conversation across all areas of life more. But and so that's like opens up a whole can of worms for a conversation. But I'm curious, when, as an artist yourself, when you're making something, are you thinking at all about the audience or how it will land?
Oh yeah, I am. There's some artists who like I had a friend who was a stone sculptor, and he would work for months on a sculpture, in his studio, finish it, build a crate it, and store it, and then do the next one. And he didn't care about anyone seeing it. But for me, I do care about people seeing it and affecting them in a certain way. So I am thinking in that way, but I'm also following my nose or whatever, just following whatever is inspiring to me in whatever way. And so I need to follow that. And sometimes I make art that people adore, and sometimes I make art that I adore, and other people are like, whatever, you know, and that's okay. And I think that's important. I'm working on a series of levels, like Carpenter's levels, but in different shapes, but with the little level bubbles. And it's all based on a friend of mine had a aluminum level under the beams of her floor, and she was jacking up the floor. It was an old adobe house, and the jack fell. She was not there at the time. And the beam came down and bent the level. So instead of being straight like this, it was like this. And it was aluminum. It was this perfect, looked manufactured that way. And you looked at it and you're like, what the hell is this for? It must be for something, and I can't understand it. And I just thought that was brilliant. And so now I'm making a series of levels based on that thing that I saw. That was just an accident, a happy accident. So I don't know if anyone will like them.
If we
But I think they're going to be great.
I think it's awesome. If we take that attitude towards this context, and we say, like, this sort of beginner's mind or completely coming out of the box, what would you say, and this is kind of an off the wall question, but how would you apply that logic to your own organizations and the ways forward? I mean, like taking a really innovative look at how do we do what we do now from a completely different perspective, as the experiment that this collaboration lab is, to kind of find new ways to do things.
Well, I think it's important to embrace our own stupid ideas. And so sometimes we have ideas and we're like, like, let's start an art gallery in the back of a bakery truck. It's a terrible idea, but it sounds fun and there's something about it. And it's like, let's just do it. And sometimes when you do something that, what seems like a stupid idea is an idea that hasn't been done before. And it isn't necessarily stupid in that way. It just appears impractical and untested and unresearched, and I think that's where things can happen. And then when you collaborate with other people, people have different ideas and they spark off each other, and every collaboration is, you get different results. And so that's just an area of great richness. And that can be with a gallery and the artist who's showing in the gallery, or it can be different artists working together, or entrepreneurial consultants and artists. And, I just think human contact is important, and contact with non-humans, all of it.
Right. When do the aliens get here? But so how do what?
Well,
So
I meant
what
more
are,
like plants and
oh well.
owls.
That,
I have these little baby screech owls. There's 4 of them that just hatched out by my house, and so they're every morning and evening I see them like trying to learn how to fly, and that I just like very inspiring. That's all I care about right now.
well, that's kind of beautiful segue to, what are the cross pollinations that need to happen within each of your respective organizations besides the screech owls? Like who can you imagine partnering with in a perfect world here within Santa Fe that would lead to new possibilities for each of you? I mean, Alice, who are your partners, for example?
Keep picking on me like I have smart
well,
answers.
No. I'm going down the
Lot of
line and you're
pressure
right to
here.
my left, so that's not fair. I could start with Drew and go backwards.
It's Drew's turn.
Okay, go Drew.
In terms of partnership, school-wise, students, in my mind, going from kindergarten through 12th grade into some sort of higher education, potentially, transitioning into a position or starting your own practice afterward, that whole pathway needs constant support in relation to that. And I say this in critical thinking. And so although I'm teaching computer science and tech is a part of my practice, I grew up when the internet just started, and at that point, I embraced this idea that it had the potential to democratize knowledge. And now, fast forward however many decades, right? I'm a lot more skeptical in relation to that, and so my approach is way more realistic. And so I look at things like AI, and I think that it's important to be able to deconstruct that from a critical perspective and then reconstruct it in a way. And to do that is going to take a lot of people to be able to help build that pathway from kindergarten through 12th, and then
What kind of people, though? That's what I'm kind of trying to get a better understanding. Like, what resources do you need to make that happen?
Well, internships to begin with, right? I think that's huge. So anybody who's working in the arts, that is doing anything innovative or would like to, has had this challenge in relation to their practice forever, and they haven't been able to resolve it because of the tools that they're using, whether it's software or it's a physical thing. If they're curious about trying to resolve that challenge, I think that type of mindset is something that's going to be really helpful in terms of setting up internships with these students who will be trained in terms of so many different mediums and be able to go into more traditional methods of working and doing it. So
And
that's
internships
one.
so you're proposing that local businesses offer internships to the students so that they get experience or can apply what they're learning in these contexts.
Yeah.
So what would be great for you would be some kind of a partnership program with businesses that would offer a slot for summer interns or something like that.
I think that's a big part of it. I think the other part is this idea of being able to go back to your home. So one of the challenges that I think a lot of us have faced when we go to school is we have access to this incredible set of tools, right? And then we go back home, and then we no longer have access to that. And so there's a gap between school and then when we possibly do get access to that again that I'd love to close. And so like we've had these discussions, Alice, where it was this idea of why not set up these pods where we're training in these locations, whether it's here or whatever, but we're able to take these pods. Maybe it's a CNC machine that we take to a community and we train the people who are interested in using that as a hybrid in terms of a traditional way of making wood carvings to, you know, somewhere that lives in between, and we leave that equipment there. And so those type of partnerships I think would be really interesting too in terms of like helping communities, helping individuals out so that they don't have to relocate to Albuquerque or Santa Fe or wherever in order to do the thing that really is calling their name.
And Alice, are you finding that there are businesses that want to create those types of partnerships, or is that not in the purview of what you are organizing?
So we helped launch here in Santa Fe. The Santa Fe High has an internship program. It's also with Capital, actually. I think it's still going, but it's high school kids. And I don't know if any of you have ever lived with a high school kid, but they're not great employees. When they're in college, they're a little better. But the challenge, of course, for a business, and most of our businesses are pretty small, if you have 2 interns, you probably need a person who is at least 5 hours, 10 hours a week overseeing that. And to go to a business that has 5 employees, that's really tough. That said, I think we have an enormous opportunity in this state to capitalize on some of our unique cultural abilities and move kids into those pathways. And the Department of Workforce Solutions here has literally millions of dollars that they can't move sometimes because they don't have enough placements into businesses, because business owners are just sort of saying, I can't deal with 2 kids right now. I'm just trying to keep my business alive. So that's the kind of thing which, and so you asked the question of what kind of intersect. I'm really fascinated by the idea that we could move back to being a society where we build beautiful things. We build beautiful buildings. We build, like, the whole environment around us is beautiful. We keep putting up these really awful apartment buildings. And you think, that who wants to live there now, much less 20? Oh, well, it's affordable. Oh, okay, thanks. Right, when we clearly are seeing a world in which machines are going to do a lot of the kind of the thinking for us. Whether we like it or not, it's coming. But machines can't always build beautiful things for us, so why aren't we now starting to think about, well, what if we had an internship program for kids in Santa Fe learning how to build in Adobe and really doing beautiful ironwork and woodwork and tile work and the things that we're great at here, right? And AI isn't going to come along, and robotics are not going to come along and replace people making 5 rosettes in a specific way. There's just not an economy of scale for that. And so artists actually might be able to start making a living again. But we need workforce development to think that way. We need higher ed to think that way. We need community colleges and high school programs to start thinking that way. So I'm ready, Drew. Let's go.
Yeah. And how do we bring all those people to the table? Did you want to say something, Laura? I didn't want to cut you off.
I just was going to say really quickly, one of the things at TIA Collection that we did, partnering with IA and graduate students, and so we had an intern each semester, fully paid, and you know, with Mario, my conversation was, I'd love to do this, love to give this opportunity. The exposure to the diversity of art that was coming in on a daily basis at the collection was pretty crazy, and so unpredictable. And so just a great way to be exposed to lots of different arts, lots of different genre, et cetera. And the trade-off was they were getting paid and they needed to work. And so it wasn't all necessarily the practical use of one's abilities. I mean, there were lots of different ways that they, every single day, helping, but that they were an equal part of the team. And so there was some overseeing, but at the same time, there was an autonomy and, you know, just setting those goals so that they realized that if we didn't meet something, it was also part of their responsibility too. They weren't just there for fun. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have a follow-up question for that.
I have one last thought in relation to it, in terms of internships. In my fund, in my grant, I have a line item that's dedicated to internships, paying the interns, right? And so hopefully that lowers that barrier of entry that may exist in terms of pushback and a small business being concerned in terms of bringing somebody on.
And then beyond internships, what goals do you each have for your organizations that are threatened by these cuts or whatever, that if you had the funding or if you had to just write the line item and not the dollar sign by it, that the community could possibly provide for you instead of, like thought of as a barter system, like if instead of you needing dollars for your organization, you just needed the thing. What are some of the things that maybe some of the people in the audience here actually have access to or could provide? I mean, yours is a little bit different because you're such a small operation, Matthew.
Just cheese and crackers.
Well, yeah.
Do you need an intern who can serve the cheese and crackers? Because I think
No,
I think
we've run into people, schools have approached us if we would take on interns at times at Axel. And exactly what you said, it's like we don't have time to
yeah, and there's no money to pay the business owner, right, to sort of maybe hire or carve out a part of one of their staff person's time. There's lots of money actually to pay interns. Like the feds give out lots of money to do this, which is great, but the business owners are like, right, but I'm still just me.
Right. I mean, part of an issue with Axel is our strength is also our weakness, which is that it's the two of us doing it all, and now we've been doing it and we got older and we're not going to do it forever. And so does it shut down or do other people take it over, and finding people who can do all the things we do, and you know, it's tricky and we don't know.
Yeah.
But, and if it ends, that's okay too. We're running a pirate radio station, which is illegal right now. So we're hoping that the FCC shuts us down, and then we'll just give them the truck, and that'll be our exit strategy.
I think
But
a lot
don't
more
tell anyone.
Right. But pirate enterprises are probably one interesting way forward. I mean, this is the way we're going to get around a lot of the, you know, breaking the rules is one of the options.
Yeah, I think it's important in terms of what's going on with the federal government is to push back, and maybe breaking the rules is part of pushing back. I don't know.
Beg for forgiveness, you don't ask for permission. What? I said you beg for forgiveness, you don't ask for permission.
Yeah, okay. I need a minute to compose my next.
I'll fill some airtime.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think for creative startups, we're looking for people who want to reimagine a system. And that requires foregoing some of the comforts that we all have, because necessarily if we're going to build a new system that makes room for more people, that means that maybe our space gets smaller. But it also means we have to start thinking about what we value differently. And love him or hate him, Trump has created an environment in which a lot of us are saying, maybe the system's not working. And so it's actually a really good time to think, okay, well, let's build a different system. And frankly, they're so chaotic and messy that they're not paying attention.
Well, that was one of the things that came out of the last system, is that it's really quite revolutionary for us to take this back into our own purview. And that's sort of what I'm trying to create here, is like, who's the they? We are the they that's going to create that new system. And so I'm not really trying to come up with answers as much as like, how do we get together? All of us who are involved with nonprofit organizations are so busy running our nonprofit organizations that we barely have time to even know who else is in the field. And so just getting to, I mean, you have access to a lot of people because you move around from place to place.
Yeah, we actually
you
find
collaborate
that
a lot.
collaborating with other organizations is great for us and great for them, and it makes everything easier. Sometimes they bring funding, sometimes they don't, but or we're reaching out to, we're doing a thing at the Dixon, the Embudo Community Library on Saturday, and at the Poe Center on Friday. And we can't do what we do without those other organizations. Site Santa Fe commissioned us to do 3 shows as part of their international that we're doing, just started and going through January. So they gave us a little bit of money, but they're also doing publicity and outreach, and they have a lot of abilities in those areas. So it's great. We've worked with the George O'Keeffe Museum and the Folk Art Museum and art galleries and all different sorts of farmers markets, and so we find that collaboration is essential, and it builds community and it builds connections, and other organizations' outreach brings people into our fold, and our outreach brings other people into their fold. And people think a place like Site Santa Fe or George O'Keeffe is all snooty and fancy, and we're rough and on the street, and so that's good for them that we break down that perception for them, and they make us look like fancy contemporary art galleries. So.
There is actually a group spearheaded by Rashawn from Vital Spaces and also Creative Startups, right? And this is and forgive me if I'm getting this wrong, but complementing the work that has been done over the last couple of years in terms of the creative economy and creating this really incredible economic report from that. And that group, and it's a group of creatives that meets maybe once a month that Brianna is part of. Yeah.
Sorry, you're talking about the recent kind of hub work that, okay,
Yes.
sorry.
Yes.
Took
yes,
me a
yes.
minute to get there. So Creative Startups is partnering with Vital Spaces, and we've launched, it's a very informal, what we're sort of calling the hub, because we don't have a better name. And it's just a group of around 40 to 60 creative people who get together and talk about what's needed. I think the current iteration is they're looking at doing like a film accelerator type, because so many people in the film industry are really hurting right now. So thinking about how we could build different resources for filmmakers, above the line, below the line, the whole thing. But that's the last I heard about that. Brianna, if she had been here, could tell you everything about it.
Well, how did you put that together? Because, it's interesting, there are a lot of us in the room that are here tonight to be engaged in that kind of conversation. And I think one of the things that's missing is a way for us all to be in communication with each other. So that's one of the things we'll be exploring here.
Yeah, so that's actually, we hear this in every community, everywhere in the world that we work, is creatives feel fractured. And everybody sort of says, well, if we just all knew everything that was going on. I don't actually subscribe to that theory, just to be honest with you, partly because I think there's a huge problem with things being fractured anyway, right? And so, but the other thing is that the idea that we should all listen to one information source. My mother will say, well, do you remember when we all watched Walter Cronkite? And I'm like, Mom, I don't think the great thing of America was like everybody watched Walter Cronkite one night. Yeah, that's just weird to me. I think we live in a world now where most people want their information from resources and sources that reflect their particular interest. It is problematic because it has fractured what we believe, and people are exploiting that to do things like what you see on Fox News, right? Where you go over there and they're talking about totally different things than what you see on CNN or the New York Times. So I'm not saying that that's a good environment, but I do think it's important to say it's not that great when all the information comes from one source. because who gets to be the one source? That's a big problem, right? And so with the hub, our intention is not like, we're the one source. Instead, it's let's get as many people from different parts of the community together who can go back and be that source and carry what they want in terms of information back to their community. And so that's been kind of our approach. And it's a very open, like, who wants to be here? What do we want to talk about, et cetera.
Well, it seems to me like from a network thinking perspective, systems, we could have multiple hubs with different people
That's exactly
kind of circulating
yes.
among them. And again, I'm just trying to start to
Yes.
plant seeds of what could our 5th session look like in terms of what we're coming up
Yeah.
with as an actionable item.
Well, and we're looking at a software tool that it's sort of social, but sort of not. It's almost, it's like the next iteration of Slack, if you will, because what we really want to do is remove any one entity being sort of the master of information. That's really problematic, we think. Whereas if everybody in this room can share information to each other, and then Drew can search, use AI to search, like, who's working in Chinle on contemporary art? And it tells him, and then it says, hey, you could connect with Matthew right here, right? We've removed any sort of centralized operator or controller from that. And so we're looking at but we're trying to get away from the social media-ish stuff. And there is sort of a rising tide of new tools that we're looking at.
Well, those are the tools that I'm really interested in. You mentioned Slack, which is something that we use in our office, thanks to Lindsay. But it's become a really great communication tool. But also, so there's this really weird dichotomy of you don't want to centralize it, although Slack is one place where we can all maybe go to get that information, or a centralized calendar. We were talking in our meeting the other day, how do you plan an event in Santa Fe when you don't know who the other players are who are planning an event? It's like trying to plan a wedding when your best friend's planning her wedding. It's a terrible thing. We have lots fewer people here in the audience because there's so many simultaneous things going on. A centralized calendar starts to feel like Big Brother, but at the same time, how do we get that flow of communication going? Any thoughts? Not solutions, but just ideas.
No.
Thank you, Matthew.
I mean, you could make the argument that we have been that we are nearing the end of a time in this country where things had to be huge, right? Big box stores are going out of business, right? You look at this theater, it's got a lot of seats. Maybe we need theaters or community centers that seat 30 people so that it doesn't feel empty necessarily. In other words, I'm sort of saying we should question this idea that having large infrastructure is the right way. Because generally what that has meant is that very few people benefit from that large infrastructure and control that large infrastructure. And so maybe it's better if we start to say, we don't have 150 people here, we have 30 people and they're super passionate. And innovation tends to happen in smaller circles when you have people coming from disparate backgrounds or skills or knowledge sets, and they have time to come across new solutions. And so innovation theorists are saying that we are running out of innovation, right? Because we all sit in big box stores and it's all the same, and we're all shopping at strip malls that all have the same stores. If we move away from that kind of system and we start to think micro and local, I think we can not only uncover a lot more innovation, but it does start to mean, like, yeah, you have 30 people in the audience instead of 300. And maybe that's okay. Like, why is 300 the goal? Who cares? Like, that's sort of the falsity of scale for scale's sake.
Well, and back to their point about data collection, I mean, we'd have a tendency, especially in theaters, to measure success by how many people were in the audience. And a few people, even on these events, well, did you get a big turnout? And I said to some people, well, we didn't get a big turnout, but everybody who was there was really passionate about just what you just said.
And a bunch of people came back because it was so meaningful to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And then yet we also have the situation where we do have these contexts. We have theaters, we have galleries, we have spaces that are needed, and Vital Spaces is doing a great job of filling those spaces that would otherwise go empty with other people who are in need. So again, it's like trying to figure out what is that ecosystem that we need to open up so that people can take advantage of and share resources. So I think that's another end game here that we're trying to figure out. And how do we get people into the conversation and keep them active in the conversation? So you guys are meeting once a month-ish?
I think so.
That sounds about right. Yeah,
Thanks,
I've
Drew.
been out of town, so I missed the last two. But yeah, it was a really healthy, like people who were really passionate, creative, all walks of life, and just bubbling up in that conversation, things that were challenging to them on a local basis. And so, like obviously, studio space, that's one, studio space, and then two, affordable studio space was something that came up, and there was multiple other topics. And so bubbling up the challenges, it felt like that was part of that session. And the next one was starting to work on solutions based upon those.
And where are the questions and the answers that you guys are noodling around? Where is that being captured so that more of us could weigh in on the conversation or have access to the conversation?
It was on Zoom, so I presume it was recorded, but I'm not, yeah.
Yeah. And Matthew, how do you organize all your collaborations?
In terms of like when we schedule things?
Well, or just like how did that come about? And who keeps it going? Is it because site needs you because you're you know, like you're the
well, in the beginning it
grungy-
was us,
the grungy
like
one?
approaching places and saying, we have this gallery, it's in a truck, here's a picture of it, here's our website, we'd really like to park in your parking lot maybe once a month, you know, and so it was years of that, but now after 15 years, it's others coming to us more and more because we've proved that we're good at what we do or worth talking to or follow through on what we do or whatever. So it's all different ways. I mean, we also have like on our homepage of our website, it's like if you're an artist and you're interested in showing at Axel, send us pictures of what you do or write a proposal for an installation, or it's very open that way. And it doesn't mean everyone has a show, but we have an openness to engage with people, and that brings a lot in. And but then we also have good outreach, and so bigger places, whether the George O'Keeffe site or folk art, come to us.
Well, you've sort of primed the pump, so it seems to be kind of moving
Yeah, it
automatically
gets
now.
its own life after a while. The first couple of years were a lot more work. I mean, it's still a lot of work, but we also have so before Axel started, I was a working artist here, and there opportunities would come up there'd be a show somewhere at some CCA or whatever, and I'd be like, shit, I should be in that show. What the fuck, you know? And I'd never heard about it, you know? And it's the day I opened Axel, all of a sudden I was like a colleague of the gallery directors and the curators and all of that. And all of a sudden I had access to all this information in a way that I didn't before. And I was like, oh, everyone should buy a truck. That's the solution. But so we created a listings page on our website. So it's a listing of arts opportunities because they come across my desk more than they come across some emerging artist's desk. And so I just type, cut and paste them into a web page, and they're organized by date. And people go there. People have contacted me and said that your thing is great. I got this show through this, and I got this, And so sometimes people send it to me, but other times I just see it in some website or email or whatever. And so just sort of generosity of sharing when you have resources that are useful to others and I know that because in the past I didn't have access to those resources. And so I make less of my own art and spend more time empowering other people to get their art out there. And that's gratifying too.
Yeah, that speaks to what Alice was saying at the very beginning of the session about, like changing the way we just do things, the whole outlook. But how does the TIA collection work, or how does it work in your experience, which is at the other extreme where it's very well funded, and how is the TIA collection finding people to collaborate with? How did they find the space here to show the art here?
I asked.
Oh.
Because there was an opportunity when CCA closed, and I wasn't in the country at that point, but I reached out to a couple of friends, and I'm like, what's going to happen to that space? Is this really going to happen, or is this not? And then very quickly somebody wrote me back. A friend said, "Oh, well, Chatter, they've already got the lease." This was like 2 days later. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to write to Chatter. I didn't know Tony at all. And I'm like, I've had my spiel for so long. Hi, you don't know me. We have lots of art. Would you like some? And
You do that internationally, and when you and I had the
Yes,
conversation, there were museums who were like, what are you talking about? What do you want from me?
too
Who
good
are
to
you?
be true.
Yeah.
So Tony came over because he was like, well, he said to me, there's good art and there's bad art. Do you have good art or do you have bad art? And I said, well, if I had bad art, would I tell you that I did? And he was like, oh, that's a good point. So he came over to see the space and to have some sense of kind of the cross-section of artists in the collection. And my simple approach was, I didn't curate all of the shows. I made sure I wanted the TIA team members to also have a voice. They're with the art all day, every day. And that they could have their own show, they could partner with another one of the team members. And the only other thought was, don't duplicate artists. There are almost 1,000 artists in the collection between historic and living, and it's a collection of 4,000 works. So don't duplicate artists. If somebody uses this artist's work, then that's off the list, which then created, everybody had to really stop and be creative in their thought process, and would they have a theme or not, et cetera. But it's been such an amazing opportunity. And for Chatter, and now it's a background for Exodus as well, when they pull their performances into the main space. And just a tremendous opportunity. So, one of the things when you said that you allow artists to share their submissions with you, and my immediate thought in my head was like, wow, no gallery does that. Every single gallery, maybe not every, don't want to offend anybody, but a majority of galleries, whether it's in Santa Fe or anywhere else, on their main contact page, no submissions accepted. Like the approach is very much, obviously they have their own program. They're making decisions based on, whether it's the group of artists and how they come together or not, if there's a little bit of, if it's a little bit discordant. But they aren't open to.
Yeah, I'll take that off the webpage, I'm sorry.
But it's that idea of opportunity. You just never know what could come your way. So there's that same thing as far as the hub is concerned. I can imagine, or I'm kind of in my head, linking it back to somebody walking into a gallery. They don't necessarily know about the artist whose show it is, and there's the intimidation factor. And so I love the fact that you were saying, and both of you all, the people are really open about asking their questions. I think that's a big part, right? Just being open. I'm just chatting.
Well, and in the spirit of being open, I'm very curious because you all have been listening to this, and I know there are thoughts going through your heads. And since nobody gave me a note card, I'm going to put you all on the spot a little bit and open it up to the floor here. Is there anything that you've been thinking of that you would, thank you, Matthew, that you would like to ask the panel?
Yeah, this brings up the question I have as a theater person, which is always at a premium, is space. Can you produce theater without a physical space? Where can you produce theater without a physical space? There are so many limited spaces that have, and ones that have already left. We're trying to get the Greer Garson going. And that has never happened over 7 years. That's a lovely space that's just been rotting. But the thing that I'm curious about is vital spaces and the hub. I'm also curious as to, I mean, you've sparked something of, I love the disaster sparks opportunity. I think that's a wonderful phrase. Who would you go to the city to say, can we do theater in the parks?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought was public libraries. So I have a somewhat limited understanding. I'm chair of the board of the 𝘽𝙧𝙤𝙀 Ensemble and love them dearly. And we went through a very tough situation where the artists were living in a house in an area here in town that had covenants or restrictions or a homeowners association that decided that there were too many cars driving in on the road. And so complained, and it was a somewhat wealthy neighborhood, and so sure enough, they got kicked out of that original house. I would say that they could perform in lots of different places, but they need space to rehearse and to be creative together. And you can't do that in a library or a park, really. In an ongoing professional, we're building a complicated piece, which is what they do. But I think there are also a lot of spaces that are going unused. And some of that is because of property tax or tax incentives for property owners. And so there is a lot of room to make policy changes that could bring creative makers, builders, artists into public view so people start to understand it's not just that thing on the wall that you buy. Like, there is creative process going on. It's not just that thing in the theater. There are people who spend all day working to make this creative experience or sound or thing that you buy. And one of the things that we're doing with California is looking at incentivizing property owners to put creatives in these spaces in downtowns, because what's happening is downtowns have lower foot traffic, and if you have lower foot traffic, those local businesses are not generating as much revenue, and if they're not generating revenue, you don't have taxes. And so it is really bad for business tax generation for cities to have empty spaces. It's a death knell. And so they've got to figure this out, but that means they've got to get after policy issues. So I don't know if that really answers your question, but I would say one of the arguments that I would make is we are past the era of telling creatives that if they just knew how to run a business, they'd be okay, because that is not true. We need policymakers to start saying, we want to invest in and support a creative economy, which means we're going to stop investing all our money in sectors that may or may not actually create well-being for all of the people in our community.
I think, you know, one of my dreams is this idea of, think about like sound here. Sound, experimental sound, every single week it feels like there's something really incredible going on. Like the Santa Fe Noise Ordinance is doing some really experimental stuff. Raven Chacon plays here frequently. There's so many different things going on there. And I look at dance, and it may be just because I've been so busy, but experimental dance, I would love to see more experimental dance out here, or experimental performances. Like, I love what Exodus is doing. And so to that end, we're working really hard in terms of getting the dome space opened up. And when I was talking about going into Kiva mode and doing that as a performance space in the round, there's an openness and a willingness there to do performances during the summer, right? Because school's not in session. And we also have a black box theater there. And so those two things, you know, stay tuned. Hopefully we'll be able to open those up a little bit more. And if you're interested, please reach out to me, and I'll, you know, I'd love to have that conversation.
Ellen, I think you had a question.
We're talking about so much stuff here, and this could go so many ways, but I think one of your answers that didn't come to you in regard to theater is, who do you go to in the city to talk about this? and what spaces on what's available and who do I work with. Well, I think our city has been so poor at consistency of art programming and art people who don't keep their jobs more than a year or two. What was her name? Who came in as the main art person for the city years ago? What was
Pauline Kamiyama?
Yeah, Pauline. She seemed like she was doing a pretty good job, and then all of a sudden she was gone, and then there was really nothing to have a basis for that kind of office or person. So, all these things, I hate to say it, but they start with the leadership of the city. And the mayor knows we're a creative economy, but for some reason, Santa Fe can't get our act together to put all these literally hundreds of arts organizations together, mostly because everybody says, I don't have time, I'm barely keeping mine afloat, I can just do what I can do. But there has to be somebody out there who would be a leader, who could take this on, who could actually fill a position within the city to, make this real. So the other thing is, in order to make these things happen, you have to have people who say yes. And we all talk to people, and we all want things to happen, and most of the time, people don't say, wow, let's see what we can do that. Yes, let's talk about it. They just, well, I'll call you sometime. Well, that's never going to get anything accomplished. Now, the third thing on my mind is, for Alice, you have a legion of 30 or 40 artists, and you get together and you talk about how can we be creative and what can we do? Can you?
I would say it's not artists necessarily, it's more people in the creative economy. And the early session was, what are some of the challenges?
Mm-hmm.
And then moving toward what are some of the solutions and who might be able to do what, who wants to do what.
Okay, can you give an example of one person in the creative economy? Like, who's part of that group?
Drew is, and
Yeah, so
I
Jamie,
didn't attend those meetings, so I don't exactly know.
so Jamie, who was on the panel last week,
Jamie's a part of it, Rashawn is a part of it, Exodus is a part of it, Dale is a part of it. A lot of people.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here you have all these executive directors and people who are heading up nonprofits, et cetera. And when they come together, it seems to me that everybody talks and talks and talks, but nothing happens. And I'm sitting here thinking, I think our biggest problem in the city is the development that's going on. And it already has come up with, these awful looking apartments that we have going on. What if your creative economy went to a home builder, whoever it is, Pulte Homes, Richmond American Homes, whoever it is, building these neighborhoods that all look the same and we're into suburbia, and said, give 50 artists one house, and let the blacksmith make the handrails. Let 10 artists do the paintings for this. Let our ceramicists do the knobs for the kitchen cabinets. Whatever it is. But there's creative ways to work with everybody, no matter if they're the smallest business or the largest corporation that you have to break into. I mean, look, our country's really, I can only think of 4-letter words to describe what's going on in America. So why not break the molds right now and just go for these super, super creative things? And be yes people who make things happen. That's the first step.
Well, I think that's part of the hope of this experiment, is that we come up with some actionable items.
Yeah.
And I think we also have to make them small enough that any person in the audience can say yes to it. Instead of these big, huge, grand ideas, they have to be actionable steps that somebody with a full-time job who's already giving their life to the arts in so many other ways can say yes to one thing, or they're doing it anyway, and they just do it tangentially to what they're already up to. I know there are a number of people who have approached me and said, you know, I've got skills as a teacher, I've got, you know, put me to use. Use me. And another idea that came up out of a conversation recently is we have this huge hospitality industry. They're all using plates. They're all using, you know, all kinds of items in their everyday life. Why aren't we putting ceramic artists to use, you know, for that? So there are lots of different ideas that can be get, but we're just looking for an opportunity to create a space and a place where those ideas can be captured and then acted on. It's easier to talk than it is to put it into action, but you sort of have to know what the problems are, and it's a moving target. I mean, everybody here is approaching it from a different facet of the problem. It's like the blind men and the elephant type of thing. So we need to identify what the problem is first, each of us seeing it from a different perspective, get us all in a room together and figure out where we go from there. I think that's the hope of this forum. You're shaking your head.
So what you just said with hospitality and ceramic plates, that's a perfect idea of something that could be acted on immediately.
So I'm going to push back on that because when's the last time anybody here bought a hand-built plate set? How much did it cost?
A lot.
How many plates does a restaurant break every day, right? I mean, the cost of that just isn't feasible. So what could you do to make that feasible? You could say, we need tax incentives to give tax breaks to locally owned restaurants that work with local artists, buying ceramics, putting stuff on the walls, et cetera, right? But you can't ask businesses. We did a program with HomeWise about 15 years ago where we had blacksmiths and we did tile ceramicists, et cetera. HomeWise was the only one willing to talk to us, right? And we still had to go get a grant to fund that project, right? Because the cost doesn't work for them. It really doesn't work for them. It doesn't work for a restaurant owner. It's not that they don't love ceramics. It's just that when they look at their bottom line, like they're not making millions of dollars, right? They're just trying to make sure that people are getting paid, and maybe they want to pay their workers $1 more an hour. And so there are a lot of great ideas that seem like, well, we should just be doing this. It'd be easy, and it's not easy. And some of it is a leadership issue, and I thank you for calling that out, because what is going on in California, we got a call from the treasurer who said, we need to figure this out, will you fly out? We have never gotten a call like that in New Mexico, right? I mean, we do have the Creative Industries Division, and they have 2 people, right? Which is crazy when you think 1 in 9 New Mexicans works in the creative economy, and we now have 2 people trying to make that happen. But that's a leadership issue. That's a leadership issue for sure. So I'm by nature very much a yes person, but I'm also a reality person who's saying, wait a minute. We got to work within like the constraints of people who pay people and trying to make a living. You know, we do have to deal with that. That doesn't mean, though, that these apartment buildings couldn't be better built so that they last longer, they employ artists, et cetera. That's a policy issue, though. It's not an economics issue until we get policy that makes it an economics issue, and that's a leadership issue.
So I think it's an interesting place to put a pin in it for now, because, well, I mean, I think it's really
solve it all.
No, I think it's really, really important, because it's one thing to have good ideas, but the reason that we're having people who bring so much experience to bear on this is so that we can have, before we go down that rabbit hole, so that we can have somebody who says, we tried this, and that's not to say that just because we tried it once, it couldn't work in another iteration, but it takes will, and it takes a lot of other things. So again, one of the things we're putting together in this questionnaire is a whole sequence of things like, what is the barrier to entry? Is it government? Is it leadership? Is it policy? Is it economics? Look at those questions. If you'd be willing, fill out the questionnaires, particularly the qualitative questions as well as just the quantitative questions. And I think that for now, I hope you'll you'll all come back to this conversation, because we have a whole new list, a whole new group of panelists next week with a whole different set of perspectives on things, and we're still at the fact-finding, fact-gathering part of this experiment. So I wanted to leave plenty of time, because last time we went 15 minutes over, for everybody to just meet and mingle and network. So we're going to close it out there. Pay attention to that question 4, which was how you were feeling, pessimistic, optimistic at the beginning, and then there's that repeat question at the end of the questionnaire. Just curious. I mean, and it's not necessarily important that we're feeling more optimistic. We might be feeling less optimistic at this stage of the conversation. That's all part of the fact-finding. So thank you all for being here. Please come back again. Please share this opportunity with people that you think might be able to contribute, and we'll call it a night. Thank you. Does Dale have anything that you want to say? No, nothing? Okay, any other final? No, okay, great. Thank you.